Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So before anything else, I would like to greet everyone a happy new year. And on this new year, we are now about to enter a new chapter on this course. And the first lesson that we're going to discuss in this new chapter is the physical and sexual self. So to begin our discussion, we are first to define what is a physical self. So as you can see there on your screen, we have their definition of a physical self. So this refers to the body. It is a marvelous container and complex, finely tuned machine with which we interface with our environment and fellow beings. It is the concrete dimension, the tangible aspect of the person that can be directly observed and examined. And according to William James, um, he considered the body as the initial source of sensation and necessary for the origin and the maintenance of personality. Now, what are the factors of um or the development of the physical self? So we have the nature and the nurture. The nature or the hereditary is the transition of traits or the characteristics from parents to offspring. It provides the raw materials of which the individual is made up. And through the genes, hereditary potentials like physical, mental, social, emotional, and moral traits passed down to generations. So that's hereditary or nature. The other factor that we have here is the nurture or the environment. The nurture or the environment is the sum total of the forces or the experiences that a person undergoes from conception to old age. It also includes here the family, friends, school, nutrition, and other agencies that one is in contact with. Now, so let's talk first the beginning of life, like from the fertilization until birth. So we're gonna be talking here the cycle, and that's not really a cycle, but the process from birth to, I mean, from fertilization to birth. So in the reproductive process, a male sperm and a female egg provide the information required to produce another human being. So in the conception occurs when these cells join as the egg is fertilized. So the pregnancy begins once the fertilized egg implants in the uterus. So the embryo grows and becomes surrounded by structures that provide support and nourishment. So, during the sexual intercourse, some sperm ejaculated from the male reproductive system. So it will swim up through the female vagina and uterus towards the oocyte. The oocyte is the egg cell. Okay, so the floating in one of the uterine tubes, and then the sperm and the egg are the gametes. I did not include the gametes on the notes, but anyway, so they each contain half the genetic information necessary for the reproduction. So when a sperm cell penetrates and fertilizes an egg, that genetic information combines. So the 23 chromosomes from the sperm pair with the 23 chromosomes in the egg. So forming how many? 46 chromosome cells. They now called zygote. So the zygote starts to divide and multiply. So as it travels towards the uterus, it divides to become blastocysts or blastocytes, which will now burrow into the uterine wall. So a fertilized egg or the zygote takes about 5 days to reach to the uterus, so from the uterine tube. So as it moves, the zygote now divides and develops into a blastocyst with an inner mass of cells and a protective outer ring. So the blastocyst attaches to the wall of the uterus and then gradually implants itself into the uterine lining. So there you can see from the events from the fertilization to birth. So you have here the fertilization and then the one week of conceptus. Where's my cursor? And then 2 weeks. Where's my cursor? Here. So you have here the embryo. So this is what the embryo looks like after 4 weeks or 4 weeks. Yeah. And then the 5 week. This is what the fetus looks like until 12 weeks. So until the gestation period. In the gestation period, this is the time now during the um which the this is not the time the development occurs. Okay? Now, so let's now talk on the culture on the body image and self-esteem and beauty. Okay. Now, we all have a different definition of beauty. Like, especially in beauty pageant, if they are asked what is beauty, they have their own perspective as to how they define beauty. And some would say they would define beauty based on the physical appearance of a person. But in reality, there is really no definite definition of beauty. We all define beauty depends on how we see or how we perceive beauty. The body image, some of us are really concerned with our body image. So by definition, body image, it is the perception that a person has of their physical self and the thoughts and feelings that result from that perception. So body image is both internal or personal and external that is based on the society. And this includes how we perceived our bodies visually. You see, we may look at ourselves or our body, we may consider it beautiful or what, and some may not. It it really depends on how an individual perceived our bodies visually. Take note, visually. And it also includes here how we feel about our physical appearance. Do we feel good about it? Do we feel bad about it? Do we like it or not? And then how we think and talk ourselves about our bodies. Nowadays, we are the ones who body shamed ourselves. No, with this should be stopped. We should embrace and love our body. We may be fat or thin or we have a good body or whatever. We should embrace it, accept it, and love it instead of body shaming. And then our sense of how other people view our bodies. That is why sometimes other people magpa-ritoke na lang just to please other people, no? Which is not, should not be. Okay. What is wrong with this one? Okay, here. So the sexual self, since we're going to be talking about the physical self and the sexual self, let's now move to the sexual self. So by definition, it is an individual's evaluation of his or her own sexual feelings and action. So the sexual self here, this refers to um the totality of oneself as a sexual being, including positive and negative concepts and feelings. So, what are the features of sexuality? So, we have sensuality, intimacy, sexual identity, the reproduction, and the sexualization. So, sensuality is the awareness and the acceptance of our own body. Intimacy is the experiencing of emotional closeness to another. And sexual identity is the process of discovering who we are in terms of sexuality. And then the reproduction is the values, the attitudes, and behaviors relating to reproduction. And sexualization is the use of sexuality to influence, to control, or manipulate. So, when does our body become sexually active? When do you think is our body become sexually active? So, actually, our body becomes sexually active during adolescence. So usually, adolescence is considered age 10 to the late teens or early 20s. Yeah. So the boys and girls reach adult height and weight, and they undergo sexual maturation, which we call puberty. So the puberty is the period of life at 10 to 15 years old. This is when the reproductive organs developed to their adult size and become functional because of the rising levels of hormones. So for the male, the testosterone and then estrogen for the females. So there is a actually a growth spurt during adolescence, no? So the growth spurt in boys occurs during mid adolescence between ages about 12 years and 16 years, yeah. And usually begins a year after the testes starts to enlarge. And then boys grow about 4 inches or about 10 centimeters during their year of maximum growth. And then the growth spurt for girls, so this occurs in early adolescence between the ages about 9.5 years and 13.5 years. Most commonly about age 11.5. Yes, and then girls grow about 3.5 inches. So that's about 9 centimeters. And during this year, or during the year of their maximum growth in general, the boys become heavier and taller than girls. So the reproductive capability continues until old age in males and menopause in females. Then the erogenous zones, so this refers to the parts of the body that are primarily perceptive and increased arousal when touched in a sexual manner. Like for example, the mouth, the breasts, then the genitals and anus. So going back to puberty, the sexual maturation or puberty usually begins at different ages depending on the genetic and environmental factors. So the sexual maturity begins earlier today than a century ago, probably because of the improvements of in nutrition, general health, and the living conditions of every individual. Like, for example, the average age that the girls begin menstruating has decreased about 3 years over the past 100 years. However, whenever sexual maturation begins, it typically occurs in the same order. Because right now, the girls, kanang mga dugon sila, usually before, na sa mga high school, but right now, elementary na siya magsugod. kanang dugo ng mga babae, no? So for boys, the sexual changes begin with the enlargement of their scrotum and testes. And it will typically followed by the lengthening of their male reproductive, and then the appearance of their pubic hair in the armpit, and the facial hair appears about 2 years after the pubic hair. And then the growth spurt usually begins a year after the testes starts to enlarge. Okay, and then for the girls, the breast budding, the first sign of their sexual menstruation, then it will be followed by the close start of the growth spurt. And shortly after that, the pubic hair and the armpit hair appears, and then menstruation begins about 2 years after the breast developed, and then um starts na sa height na magkatubo. Yes. Now, so the human sexual behavior. So there are two major factors that determine human sexual behavior, and these are the inherited sexual response patterns that evolve as mean of ensuring reproduction that becomes part of each individual, and then the degree of restraint or the influence exerted by the society in the expression of his or her sexuality. So what are the types of behavior? So we have solitary behavior and the social sexual behavior. So in the solitary behavior, this is the self-gratification or the self-stimulation that leads to arousal and climax. So this is usually done in private, but also in social sexual relationships. And this begins at the beginning of puberty, and usually this involves fantasies. While social sexual behavior, on the other hand, begins in childhood, and this is motivated by curiosity, such as showing or examining genitalia, necking or petting, and is considered as part of learning process of courtship and finding a marriage partner. So coitus here, we have a term coitus, and this refers to the insertion of the male organ to the female organ. So we made mention of the term petting. So the term petting actually differs from hugging, kissing, and generalized caresses of the clothed body to practice involving simulation of the genitals. And this can be done, or the petting can be done as an expression of affection and a source of pleasure preliminary to coitus, which was defined earlier that a term coitus refers to the insertion of the male organ to the female organ. Now, let's now talk the physiology and the psychology of human sexual response. So the first one is the excitement phase. So the excitement phase caused by the increase in pulse and blood pressure results in increased in skin temperature, flushing, swelling, rapid breathing, secretion of genital fluids and vaginal expansion, and muscle tension. And then the plateau phase, generally a short duration. If stimulation is continued, orgasm usually occurs. And then the sexual climax, a feeling of abrupt, intense pleasure, increase of blood pressure, spasm of pelvic muscle causing contraction of female organ, and the ejaculation by the male, and also causes involuntary vocalizations. And then the resolution phase, return to a normal physiologic state. Males return to normal even if stimulation continues but continued stimulation can produce additional orgasms in females. So that's it. That ends our lesson 1 of this chapter. So the lecture notes will be uploaded on your Google Classroom, and the activity will also be uploaded on your Google Classroom. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Please, if you wish to go over with this video lecture, feel free to do so. Anyway, this will be uploaded on your Google Classroom. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good day.